The other day I checked the Apple website and I realized that the iPad prices are absolutely cooked right now. The iPad Air has gone up by 25%. The iPad Pro costs as much as a MacBook now, and even the absolute base iPad has been raised by $100. Holy, how are we supposed to afford anything right now? So naturally, I got the most basic, boring iPad that Apple makes. No OLED, no M chip, no 120Hz, no Pro, and the only iPad right now that costs less than my rent. And look, on backmarket, the base iPad is already considerably cheaper than buying it from Apple. And would you look at that? The iPad Pro M1 or even the M2, which I have here today, is weirdly close in price to the base iPad on Apple's website. That is crazy. Also, because it's back to school season, backmarket is offering a free month of Duolingo when you buy any refurbished MacBook, laptop, or an iPad on the backmarket, and you don't even need to give your credit card information to get your code, so check the description for the details. Anyway, this got me thinking, if this is all that you can afford, how cooked is the base iPad compared to something older like the M1 iPad or the M2 iPad? How much are you missing out, and can you get away by paying less? I expected the base iPad to feel like a punishment, but honestly, this is way more usable than I expected. The reason why I even got an iPad in the first place was to use it as a preview for my camera and to use it as a second display for my MacBook. And considering that I got the iPad Pro M2, that's a little overkill, but I did save a lot of money, so is it overkill? Initially, I was really against the idea of buying the base iPad because there were so many reviews and people on Reddit saying that the screen on the base iPad is not laminated and you can see a tiny air gap between the glass and the display, whereas on the Pro iPads and even the Air models, it feels like the image is right at your fingertips. Also, apparently the screen sounds kind of hollow, which it kind of does, so if you draw, it's not going to be as good. And yeah, that actually put me off, but the thing is, if you're not drawing on it, the screen is perfectly fine. I honestly do not give a flying baboon whether the screen is laminated or not. I realized that for what I use this for, it's a very subtle difference. Like, yeah, if you look at it side by side, at an angle, it does look worse, but this is not gonna like raise your cortisol levels, so just relax. Obviously, the new iPad Pros with the M4s and the M5s have OLED screens and they will beat the base iPad to the ground, but let's be real, I'm not buying that, you're not buying that, so let's focus on the older Pro iPads. What does make a difference though is that 120Hz screen, which again, if you're watching Netflix or if you're just buying this for your mum, it doesn't really matter. But for everything else, it is noticeable. Like again, drawing on it with 60Hz, it feels detached from your hand and you can't even use a second gen Apple Pencil, so it doesn't really feel like this was made for drawing or even note taking, which I guess you could do on it. I don't know if it's because of the new iPad OS or because of the A16 chip on this iPad, but it just feels stuttery, especially when you pull down for the control panel. And just because you can multitask on it, I don't think you'd want to because of the stuttering and lag. The 60Hz is like the most immediate and tangible way to tell that you paid less. It's almost like Apple's doing this on purpose. They know that you'll want the iPad Pro just for the 120Hz, and for me, that's like the main thing that made me realize, yeah, maybe the iPad Pro was the right choice. On the Pro, the screen is also less reflective, more colorful, more accurate and brighter, which does sound amazing. It makes the base iPad sound so bad, but it's only when you have the Pro side by side that makes you go, oh, the Pro is better. Well, of course it is. But this is where I had to stop myself because all this spec stuff is starting to hurt my brain. I was comparing laminated displays, refresh rates, all the little details, but bro, it's just an iPad. So I tried using the base iPad alongside the iPad Pro M2 like a normal person who just needs an iPad, just to see what I'd be missing out on, and I realized a couple of things about the base iPad. When listening to music, I noticed that the iPad Pro has much better speakers because it's a 4-speaker system, whereas the base iPad only uses 2. And you know, maybe it's not such a big deal, but if you're watching Netflix, you definitely notice that it sounds a little tinny and the bass is not as good. And speaking of YouTube, I didn't really notice any quality difference. Like if you're just watching a random video, it will look exactly the same. Like yeah, scrolling about, I just wanted to find a video as quickly as possible so I didn't have to torture myself with the 60 Hz. But I don't think anyone would be sitting there thinking, you know what this iPad is missing? The P3 color accuracy. Also, having this powerful M chip in the iPad Pro means I can play something like Assassin's Creed Mirage, Resident Evil, or Death Stranding, of which none of them work with the base iPad. I wouldn't call this a deal breaker, but it's more of a flex. Like, it's a little bit sad that you can't play this on the base iPad. But okay, what else is missing on the base iPad? Well, the Apple Intelligence, but I mean, let's be real, right now it's kind of useless, but it might actually become pretty good with the next update. Also, Face ID is missing from the base iPad, and I didn't think much of it, but it's so nice to be able to just double tap the screen and swipe up. Having the Touch ID as the only way to authenticate yourself feels a little bit outdated. Like, if you unlock your iPad like 50 times a day, it adds up and it actually starts getting a little bit annoying. But the base iPad does not ruin YouTube, it does not make Netflix unwatchable. And as a second display for my MacBook, it does the job. Like, it doesn't need to be fancy or like super accurate or super bright. And yeah, I can tell that my mouse gets a little handicapped the second that I drag my mouse over, but just to have it as a display for this reason, the base iPad is fine. It's just an extra screen. Same thing for the camera monitoring. I don't need a super fancy screen to make sure my face is in frame, and my forehead does not need ProMotion. The thing that you have to consider is that the base iPad is from 2025, which is still the newest one, but the new iPad is somewhere on the horizon, probably in 2027. But the iPad Pro M1 is from 5 years ago, so you have to make sure that you get it in good condition, you have to make sure the battery health is good, because at this point it is kind of old, and so it's probably gonna get like a year less of software support compared to the base iPad. And also the battery might be not as good as the base iPad. But I think for most people, that is a good trade-off. Maybe 1 year less of software support and worse battery for a much better iPad. Now you may ask, what about the Air models? And honestly, I don't know who they're for, because yeah, they do have the powerful M chips, they do have the laminated screens, but they don't have 120 Hz. Like, what? At least for me, that's like the one thing that makes them feel expensive. So unless you want the 64 gig model, which to be fair is really cheap, the iPad Air just kind of confuses me. Especially seeing them on the Apple's website, like, what is this price? So to be honest, I think if you're buying straight from Apple, you could easily get away with the base iPad, considering that the Pro models are so damn expensive. But I really think you should buy a used iPad, because you can get a massive discount on the Pro models, to the point where it might only be like an extra $100 to $200 to get the Pro model, and at that point I would take the Pro model any day, especially because the 120 Hz makes a huge difference. It's way better for drawing, it has better speakers, the extra power, the Face ID, and all of those things combined makes it feel way more premium. So if you want to buy any of these iPads, I'm going to leave some links down below, and let me know which iPad you'd rather go for. Anyway, I'll see you in the next video.